Cursed Gift. A Broken Realms short story. Vonthi and her kin have returned, High Oracle, said Siskai. Morathi did not miss the hint of consternation in the warrior's voice. It was intriguing, for Siskai was one of her most ruthless and unflappable killers. Bring them, said Morathi, her high, cold voice echoing across the hall. No sooner had Siskai hauled open the iron doors of the Hellheart's audience hall than a sickly crimson light spilled through from the corridor beyond. The stench of cursed magic met the High Oracle's nostrils. She sat forward, her dark eyes sparkling with excitement. 6 figures staggered into view, guarded at glaive point by a retinue of Morathi's household guard. All were cloaked and hooded, and even though the royal chambers were bathed in brazier light, the shadows seemed to flow about their live forms like running water. The shadow stalkers knelt in deference, and Morathi saw that all of them were wrapped in bandages of blood-stained cloth, their faces and bare flesh concealed. Morathi could smell the scent of rotten, spoiled meat. High Oracle, said the leader of the Shadow Stalkers, a tall, slender figure wearing the mirrored mask of a shroud queen. Vonthi's snaking hair floated about her, as if she were underwater. Your will is done. We bear the blood of Cain. Morathi's lips peeled back from her teeth in a triumphant smile. Vonthi flashed a hand signal, and one of the Shademark, a female, the twin of Scienza, of a witch elf sheathed on her lips, came forward, clutching a dark crystal ewer in trembling arms. Morathi recognized the aura of magic-dampening nullstone, but the container was glowing red and crisscrossed with splintering cracks. This is all that you bring me, she said. The Shroud Queen shook her head. 2 of Morathi's household guard approached, dragging with them a small and pitiful creature. A human bound in chains, 2 bleeding holes where his eyes had once been. He wore the gilded robes of a sorcerer, and 2 curving horns sprouted from his temples. The man was whispering and giggling to himself, clearly half deranged. We captured this one within Varanthax's maw, said Vonthi, one of the Ever-Chosen's filth, tasked with the extraction of Cain's blood. It is from him that we recovered the sample you hold, but I must warn you, mistress, this substance is foul, and it is dangerous. A single drop can warp the flesh, and it is the blood of Almighty Cain, Morath said, cutting her off. Its power is great, yes, but the faithful must not fear its divine touch. She reached out and seized the ewer, feeling the burning heat of its contents through the nullstone receptacle. Here it was, the substance she had sought ever since she heard the rumors of its body-warping potency. Pure varanite, the molten realmstone of the 8 points. Contained within this ewer was the power to remake one's flesh and perhaps one's very soul. This was her salvation, her path to a long-desired ascension. A sudden scream snapped Morathi from her thoughts. The elf who carried the ewer had collapsed to her knees, clasping her skull with bandaged hands and wailing in agony. Morathi glanced over at Siskai, and the iron scale snarled and came forward, shoving the stricken shadow stalker roughly to the floor. Grasping a handful of the blood-stained wrappings, the Melusite tore them loose and recoiled with a hiss of disgust. Morathi walked over to the convulsing elf and cocked her head thoughtfully as she examined the effects of varanite exposure firsthand. It was not a pretty sight. All the way up the shadow stalker's body, from her hip to her neck, the flesh had transformed into dozens of gibbering, snapping mouths, filled with mismatched fangs and lashing tongues. The wretched creature's body was devouring itself. The High Oracle unstopped the ewer and tipped it gently forwards. A single blood-red globule escaped from the crystal container and splashed across the elf's forehead. Almost instantly, the flesh rippled and bubbled like boiling oil, and a foul, sulphurous smell filled the chamber. Morathi saw the bones of the skull melt and fold, becoming a shapeless lump of matter. Dozens of bloodshot eyes sprouted from nowhere, and barbed tentacles burst forth, tasting the air with obscene, hungry motions. Fascinating, said Morathi. Then she nodded to Siskai. The iron scale stepped forward and drove her serpent-crested Keldrasaith into the twisting monstrosity over and over until it stopped moving. At the same time, the Viperic guard advanced and set to butchering the rest of the contaminated Shadowstalkers. They put up no fight at all as they were slain. Clearly, death came as quite a relief. The captured sorcerer began to howl with laughter. Only a vicious blow from his Melusai captors silenced his mirth. He slumped in their arms, blood pouring from a crushed nose. Of the Shadow Stalkers, only Vonthi was left alive. The Shroud Queen's opaque war mask betrayed no hint of its bearer's emotions. "Clearly, there's some experimentation to be done," said the High Oracle. "The varanite will need to be tempered, its mutative qualities suppressed. Fortunately, I have some experience in such matters. Tell me this, Vonthi. Can we recover more?" Vonthi seemed to hesitate just a moment before answering. "Much more, High Oracle. The Ever-Chosen's agents have transformed Varanthax's Maw into a center of infernal industry. They utilize demon creatures to draw varanite up from the crust of the 8 points." The Shroud Queen gestured to her human prisoner. "This one. He knows much about the Ever-Chosen's plans. He serves the Gaunt summoner known as the Eater of Tomes, the wretch whom Archaon tasked with extracting the substance." "You have served me well, Vonthi," said Morathi, placing a hand on her agent's shoulder. "My life for Cain, mistress." "Indeed," said Morathi. Vonthi did not even see the knife that plunged into her heart. The Shroud Queen's body slumped to the floor. The High Oracle regretted having disposed of such a useful asset, but likely she had already been contaminated, and in any case, what had transpired within these chambers had to stay between Morathi and her Scathborn for now. She had plenty more agents bearing the Meerkath shade mark at her disposal. "Now," said Morathi, turning to her eyeless captive, "you and I have much to discuss, human. Beginning with this. What does the Ever-Chosen plan to do with the Realmstone he's gathering?" "My lips are sealed," crackled the sorcerer, chortling wetly through his broken teeth. "Sealed!" Morathi sighed. "Take him to the dungeons." In the end, the prisoner spoke freely and desperately. When Morathi had finished squeezing every drop of information out of the mewling lump of meat, she left the pain dungeons, wiping blood from her ritual knife. Siskai was waiting. The commander of the High Oracle's household guard did not speak, but Morathi could sense the Melusai's intrigue. She let the warriors stew for several minutes as they climbed the curving stair to her private chambers. Past the gallery of statues, defeated foes trapped forever in their final moments of agony. "The Ever-Chosen plans to unseal the gates of Azir," said the High Oracle at last. "He will corrupt the gates with varanite, transforming them into portals of chaos energy through which his armies will march upon the heavens." Siskai thought for a moment before answering. "What concern of that is ours?" Morathi smiled. "It is an amusing prospect, is it not? But we cannot let it happen. At least not yet. For now, our alliance with Sigmar must remain intact, no matter how much it galls me to pretend that the simple-minded fool is my equal. Indeed, I believe we shall strengthen our bonds. This intelligence presents me with an intriguing opportunity." Siskai did not speak. That terseness was one of the things Morathi most valued about the Scathborn. "I require more varanite," said High Oracle. "Much more. Summon the Viperic Guard, and make them ready to travel. I must speak with the man-god directly. Once Sigmar learns of the knife at his throat, he will surely join his cause to that of Hagnar. If all goes well, he will help me lay claim to that which I seek. Then, the real work can begin." Alright, so let's talk about this story. If you have seen my coverage on what went on in the Broken Realms Morathi book, you know that this is essentially a setup for what happened in that book, where Morathi's spies figured out that Archaon was constructing this huge fortress facility at Varanthax's Maw. They infiltrated it, found the substance that she needed to be able to kind of ascend to godhood, and now we're seeing behind the curtain of just how they got that information. They sent in spies, the Shadow Stalkers, which you can get for Warcry specifically. They scouted it out, found it, and brought it back. Now, all of these things we kind of knew. It's not like new information if you read that book or heard people talk about it. The thing that I do like, though, is it actually shows us what happens when someone touches varanite, right? It's kind of gross mutations, rampant mutation and corruptive properties. And the idea that she saw that was like, oh, we got something here, is super dark, and I absolutely love it. I find it fascinating just the disparity between Morathi and her mortal followers, as well, mortal as much as elves can be, but that and her Scathborn, right? That they are allowed to know the truth, and they're allowed to know all the secrets, and she can plot with her little entourage while leading everybody else astray. There's just something about calling, this realm stone the blood of Cain, because, if you don't know, varanite kind of takes the look of bubbling blood, like gore and that kind of stuff. So, in terms of like a description looking like what it is, it's pretty spot on. But the fact that they think it's this holy artifact and she's just playing it. And again, we get to see that kind of thing in the background of extorting information, concocting plans, and being like, hey, we know this thing about what Archaon's trying to do to Azir. And while her entourage doesn't understand it, her seeing like, no, it's leverage, and leverage is the most powerful thing in the hands of somebody like Morathi who can come up with these crazy plans. And of course, we saw in Broken Realms Morathi, he absolutely fell for it. And of course, in this story, we still have no inclination to believe that Archaon's plans were actually thwarted. If anything, she might have slowed it down. She did make the point of, we don't want him destroyed, at least not yet, kind of a thing. But that plan is still technically in play as far as we know. But friends, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Obviously this one, it's a bit of a recap of stuff we already knew, but I liked having more interest and more spotlight put on, first of all, the Shadow Stalkers and how they relate to the rest of, Morathi's entourage. They all walked in and they all had spears pointed at them because these guys are corrupted. There's something wrong with them in this story. Seeing how flippantly she treats them when it comes to testing out varanite as well as coming up with plans and that kind of stuff. I absolutely love this. This is a peek behind the curtain that I really enjoyed. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. So tell me your thoughts down below. Did you like this story as a little, like I said, bolt on to the main arc that happened in Broken Realms Morathi? Tell me why you did, why you didn't, and I'll talk to you in my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Happy wargaming. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed that video. It was made possible by the folks over here to the left. These are my top supporters over here on YouTube and on Patreon that keep this channel going. If you'd like to learn more about how to become a supporter and get some cool things in the process, like exclusive pictures and interactions with me and get your questions answered here on the channel, go ahead and click any of the links down below or the join button on the community page over on YouTube. Regardless of your choice, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me with this video, and I look forward to seeing you in my next one. Happy wargaming.